Hey, this is Snipes, and I'm going to explain the third boss. It depends which boss is the third boss. You can do any of the first four, but this is the third video. And it's Alysrazor, the Fire Phoenix, and the firelands 4.2 new content raid. First thing I'm going to do is go through all of the boss abilities, all of the mechanics of the fight before I explain how to deal with the mechanics. The first one here is Firestorm. This is just the intro to the pull. What's going to happen is the raid's going to run in and aggro the boss, and Alysrazor is going to blow up the raid for 31k, maybe a little more, maybe a little less because of resistance, and fly up in the air. We're going to get knocked back. This ability is just volcanic fire. It's nothing too special. What's going to happen is she's going to make a fire wall on the entrance and exit of her little platform there. And if you get within 6 yards of it, it's going to tick for 105,000 damage. So you pretty much can't get within 6 yards of these fire walls. There's two of them, entrance and exit. Blazing Claw is Alysrazor clawing through the center of the platform, doing 105k damage to anyone within 25 yards. Cone in front of her, AoE. Also, what's going to happen is, put it into a comparison, is kind of like Deep Breath for Valiona and Thoralion fight. She's gonna go up the middle, but I'm pretty sure it's almost always, or if not always, up the middle, clawing her way up. So you want to stay clear as much as possible from the middle whenever she's not in your line of sight. This is actually a string of abilities, but they all pretty much tie together. Alysrazor is going to molt and shed some feathers that are going to land on the ground, and they become right-clickable. Just like when you use a lever, it's going to be that little gear icon. When you do this, it's going to increase, it's going to make all of your spells castable while running, and you're going to run 30% faster. The second ability that it will give you is after you collect 3 of them, you'll get the Wings of Flame buff, which allows you to fly for 20 seconds. So, what's going to happen is DPS are going to run around collecting these, collect 3 of them, and they're going to fly up and deal with the flying mechanics of this fight, and I'll get into that. And if there's any left over that a healer can grab, healing while running is always a good thing too, but make sure DPS get them first. This is the flying mechanic of the fight. What happens is Alysrazor is going to every now and then give off these rings of fire in the air, which only are active for 3 seconds, so you have to be quick to fly through them. You have to fly through these rings and gain blazing power. It increases your haste by 4% and stacks 25 times, which means 100% haste if you get all the stacks. Each stack also will restore mana, rage, energy, runic power, holy power, every energy pool pretty much it's going to give you the buffs for. It also refreshes the duration of your Wings of Flame, which is your flying ability. So, because you have Wings of Flame for 20 seconds, you have to fly through these rings to keep being able to fly. The last thing to note about the rings is after you fly through 25 of them, you're going to get another buff, which is called Alysrazor. What that does is it gives you 50% crit strike for 30 seconds. So on top of the 100% haste, which is going to crazy improve on your DPS, you're going to get 50% more haste for crit for 30 seconds, which is going to do amazing things to your DPS on the boss. The last thing of note for the flying phase is, of course, you're going to be flying through the rings as much as possible. You're going to be DPSing the boss, and it's going to be a crazy DPS because of the haste and crit again. The last thing, though, is she's going to periodically give off these incendiary clouds. They're going to be these clouds in the sky. She'll give off 1 to 3 of them. It's random, and they'll last about 3 seconds. If you fly through them, you're going to suffer about 30k damage. every 1.5 seconds it ticks. So if you're in there for 4.5 seconds, that's about 100,000 damage. Very bad. You got to avoid these at the same time DPSing the boss and flying through the rings. At the same time, as the DPS is flying around up top, there are some mechanics that are going to be added to the ground people. One is the Blazing Talon Initiates. They're going to fly in from the firelands and assist Alysrazor. I don't believe they're tankable. If they are, tanks will pick them up. I think the main priority is to nuke them down along with the hatchlings and interrupt and stun them whenever possible. Another thing is brush fire. It's these little pools of fire. They're very recognizable. They're fairly small, and they do kind of crawl around very slowly. It's just the basic mechanic of don't stand in the pools of fire. Now, back to what's going to be happening down on the ground as the DPS is flying around. There's these little hatchlings are going to be spawned, usually, I believe, 2 of them, and they fixate. They fixate on the target who is closest to them upon spawning. That being the case, if a healer is closest to them, it's going to only attack the healer, and there's no way that you're going to be able to pull off. So, when they spawn, a tank has to be within range, or the closest to them. One tank on one, and another tank on the other. You have to assign this. The next thing is they're going to be, upon spawning, satiated, which means they're not hungry, which is a good thing. What happens is they're satiated for 15 seconds. That's 15 seconds you don't have to worry about them beating the fuck out of you. In that 15 seconds, pretty soon they're going to be hungry, and when they're hungry, they have a 20% chance to hit you and throw a tantrum. So, after 15 seconds of satiated, they're going to become hungry. When they're hungry, they have a 20% chance to hit you and become frenzied, or as it's called in this fight, tantrum. So, shortly after being hungry, they're going to start frenzying on you, which means you have to get them unhungry, satiated again. To do this, tanks have to kite them to a nearby worm, and I'll explain that later, and they will eat the worm, and then they'll go back to satiated, which means they will not be frenzied or lusted. Just a list of the Phoenix Voracious Hatchling's abilities. First one's Gushing Wound. It's a 6-yard cone in front of them, and they bleed 3,000 physical damage every 0.2 seconds until the affected target falls below 50% health. So, you really don't want to stand behind the tank, and tanks don't want to face them at the rate at all. If anyone gets hit by that, it pretty much means they're going to be having a damage over time until they hit 50% health. And healers, of course, can't be healing everyone with this ability, so keep in mind, don't be behind the tank. Cone AoE does lots of damage. The second thing is 2 sets of 4 lava worms going to be spawning up. Again, because of the Phoenix hatchlings being hungry and satiated and the tantrum, you're going to want to pull them towards these worms. The thing is, though, the worms are going to spin around, breathing out a 14-yard cone flamethrower. It does about 31k damage every 1 second. It ticks 30k per second. Now, at a certain point, I'm unsure if it's a timer or if it's when the boss reaches X amount of health, but she's going to remove the Wings of Flame buff on the DPS who is in the sky, which means they're going to get thrown to the ground and everyone is going to be on the ground. She's going to do a move called Fiery Vortex when she lands in the middle. Anyone in the middle is going to get owned for just crazy amount of damage. You don't want to be in the middle when she lands. And after that, these little fire tornadoes will spawn. And to put it in comparison to another fight is Alysrazor's tornadoes. There's going to be a group of them moving clockwise and another group of them being counterclockwise, and there are gaps in between them so that you can fit in between them. Now, after landing and blowing up in the middle, you're going to deal with the tornadoes, and then after they're gone, you're going to deal with Alysrazor in the middle. It's kind of like the Magma getting chained down phase. It's a burn phase. You pop Lust, pop your cooldowns, nuke her to shit. She takes 100% increased damage. Thing is, she starts off with 0 molten power. And the stage will start up and she'll go become active again at 50 molten power. What happens? She restores 3 molten power every 2 seconds. Also, there are going to be these Flame Claw initiates, these little fire druids, and they're going to channel to her and restore 1 molten power every second. And there's going to be 2 of them. So, any stun locks or potentially CC, I don't know. I believe it is just stun locks and interrupts. Fuck up their channeling to her so they can't restore her molten power. That way you can maximize your DPS on her. Another thing is, every time she is struck by a harmful spell, she's going to emit Essence of Green. Essence of Green is gonna blow up this green shit and give 10% maximum mana to all players. So every time you hit her, 10% mana. It's really nice. So after she hits 50 molten power, she's going to start reigniting to her full potential. What happens is she's going to start blowing up using Blazing Buffet. It's going to do 10k damage to the entire raid. The second ability is, again, she's going to claw up the middle, similar to the twins breathing up the middle with deep breath. You also have to tank her during this phase, whereas before, when she was landed on the ground, she was immobilized, and tanks would actually be on the flame druids, the fire druids, for stun lock and interrupts. And when she reaches full power, which is at 100 molten power, it's a rinse and repeat of everything I just explained until you